You know how to book flights and hotels. All you're missing is a tool to plan the travel experiences you'll have once you arrive. That's why you need Viator. Book guided tours, activities, excursions, and more in one place to make your trip truly unforgettable. Viator has over 300,000 travel experiences to choose from. Everything from simple tours to extreme adventures and all the niche, interesting stuff in between. So you can plan something that everyone you're traveling with will enjoy. Real traveler reviews give the inside scoop from people who've already been on the experiences you're considering. So you can plan with confidence. Free cancellation helps you plan for the unexpected. And 24/7 customer support means you can travel worry-free. Download the Viator app now and use code Viator10 for 10% off your first booking in the app. Find travel experiences for you. Do more with Viator. What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit a million orders stage? Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
Hey everyone, welcome to Comedy Album Book Club. This is Matt, and I'd like to welcome you to our 55th episode and our third year of doing podcasts. This marks a special anniversary. We're circling back to a special album for me, Let's Get Small. Luba Magnus is our featured panelist who selected the album. Luba is the host of the comedy show All You Need at Comedy Bar, which returns Friday, September the 11th, 2020. We are also joined by Yao Atway, a stand-up and improv and sketch comedian, all-around amazingly funny human being. And we discussed their unique takes on this album that really helped inform all three of our comedy experiences. This is a special episode as well because it is the last episode of Comedy Album Book Club. First, I want to thank Jason DeLine and Neil Jones. Neil, who joined us on the first few episodes, and Jason, who is the host for most of the 3 years, who brought me in and helped me really understand how much I love comedy. Over the past 3 years, I've got to know so many amazing and incredible people. I've had these terrific conversations, and this has let me understand how much comedy is important to my life. So while this is our last episode in its current form, please stick around, stay subscribed. We'll be coming back with one-off episodes, special conversations, as well as returning down the road in a new form once we've been able to sort of put everything in a row. But for the time being, I'm going to be focusing on my own material. And that's one of the most amazing things about this show. It's helped me learn from some of the masters and see and hear the input from some terrific Canadian and international comedians. Anyhow, thank you for joining us on this journey. If you haven't already listened to the album, give it a listen before you start listening to the episode. And please enjoy Steve Martin's Let's Get Small on the Comedy Album Book Club. Welcome to Comedy Album Book Club. This week we listened to Steve Martin's Let's Get Small. As always, we recommend you listen to the album before listening to our show. That way you can fully appreciate the feedback and discussion. Let's Get Small was first recorded at the Boarding House in San Francisco in 1976 and released in 1977. Other artists who performed there were Robin Williams, Lenny Bruce, Barbra Streisand. Steve Martin recorded 4 comedy albums: Let's Get Small, A Wild and Crazy Guy, Comedy's Not Pretty, and the Steve Martin Brothers, which is half comedy and half bluegrass music, and is actually a really good bluegrass album if you're into bluegrass music. And then after releasing the Steve Martin Brothers album, retired from stand-up comedy for 36 years. Now, released in 77, Let's Get Small won the Best Comedy Album Grammy for the 1978 Grammys. It was competing against Saturday Night Live, which released a compilation album of sketches from their first season, Richard Pryor, Ernie Kovacs, and George Carlin. It went to platinum and number 10 on the Billboard Top 200. Steve Martin was said to have said he had done comedy for 18 years, stand-up comedy. The first 10 are spent learning, the next 4 are refining, and the final 4 were in wild success. He's a magician, a musician, and a collector of art. He started as a writer with Carl Reiner on the Smothers Brothers. This is also where he made his first television appearance. One of the few appearances where you'll see him with dark hair. It's actually very disconcerting to see. And he incorporated a lot of his magic into that first. He was a terrible magician. And it was actually kind of funny because, I mean, as a kid, he spent his youth working at Disneyland in their magic shop and would, in fact, return over the course of the years to Johnny Carson as the Great Flydini, doing a magic bit there. Yeah, so he is a very interesting character. And today we have Luba Magnus and Yao Akwe. We're going to talk about Steve Martin's Let's Get Small. So welcome, both of you.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, so I guess first, Luba, you chose this album. What inspired you to select this album in particular?
This was, I'd say, ground zero for me actually considering comedy as a career. So back in high school, I went to literally just like a vintage store and I found this album in a dollar bin. I bought it on vinyl for $1.
Wow.
And my family still had their old turntable. And I remember my parents are big comedy fans. And they would always talk about, because I grew up with Steve Martin being like the dad and all these like goofy kind of like so comedies, you know. And my parents were like, oh, back in the day, he was so funny. And me being a teenager, I'm like, I'm sure he was. So I bought this album, and when they weren't home, I put it on the record player. And it was completely not at all what I was expecting. Like, it turns on, we heard it, like it's the intro, and then this beautiful banjo starts playing. And then it's almost like he just started in this like anti-comedy, like making fun of comedy. And I'd never heard anything like that. And I'm obviously like a big like folk music fan and stuff like that. So just to see it all combined and using, it's stand up, but it's not stand up. It uses other elements, just the whole thing. I just fell in love. Yeah. So that's kind of where it started.
And yeah, what was your first exposure to Steve Martin and this album?
The same thing as Luba. Like my first real exposure is Fall for the Bride. I'm sure a lot of people saw that. The Jerk, all the movie stuff. Then I was told he did stand up before. And at that time, I was a big Eddie Murphy fan, so I just found out Eddie Murphy. Not just, but I found out Eddie Murphy had done stand up, and at that point, it like made sense to me that some actors do stand up before. So I look more into Steve Martin. I have his book, Born Standing Up. I've read that a few times. I from my end, now that I'm finding out Lupa picked this album, it's not a surprise at all, because in my head this whole time I'm thinking, this is like right up her alley. This is like for me, because it's not like right up my alley when it comes to like stand up, I can like sit down and appreciate it, which I thoroughly enjoy. It's why I like watching Lupa, because like I can never do what she does, so I can like just enjoy it instead of like analyze it, which I feel like a lot of comics do for a while. They just kind of analyze it. So with Steve Martin, I enjoyed it. I had listened to Wild and Crazy Guy, and I knew about the Saturday Night Live appearances. I didn't know that it won the Grammy and beat Richard Pryor and George Carlin that year, which is
like that's stiff competition.
I mean, also, what do awards mean?
Yeah.
What do awards mean? You know what? Nothing if you're on that level. Everything if you're trying to get a visa. So, but at the same time, like it stands up. Like Steve Martin is that strong a comedian, so like you just hear those names because everyone who's in comedy says they look up to either Pryor or Carlin. Not many people say Steve Martin. I think more people should. But it's just kind of a feat and incredible. It was a fun. Yeah. This is not the first time I've listened to this album. So.
Yeah, I find that, like Libby, you mentioned the anti-comedy thing, because I mean he was sort of coming like big at around the same time you had other anti-comedy comics like Andy Kaufman like coming through the scene, like, and during that time, like it's like over the first couple of years of Saturday Night Live, Steve Martin hosted 5 times. It was the first host to do five episodes, and it's like it's interesting because you can compare, like Kaufman does not age at all well. Like his material is very at the moment, and like you can look at it at an academic level, but as an enjoyment level, it's like there's very little joy to be found in his bits. But like Steve Martin, I think because there's a core of actually just good comedy writing to it, like that it does hold up. Like, and it's an interesting sort of like anti-comedy can still be comedy kind of thing.
Oh yeah, and like the topics that he's choosing is also relatable. At the same time, it's such a fine line to balance between being alt and also understandable, and I try my best to play with that all the time, and it's hard. And yeah, it's it ages well, and I also think there's just a lot of joy in it. Like I listened to Grandmother's Song that bit on this album regularly, like it like there's nothing not to like, it's not it's got the sweet banjo, it literally just goes really absurd, like like what do you, it's kind of like when you're feeling down or what's, I don't know if there's a saying for it, but basically like, oh, if your knee hurts, you bump your elbow, then you'll start thinking about your elbow, like the song, starts as like the sweet song, but then it's just like go into a closet and suck eggs. Like, what does that even mean? And then you're not thinking about anything anymore, so it's just goofy and strange. And I think maybe that's too why it ages well, because it's not talking about anything in the time, it just really focuses on being goofy.
yeah but it's sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say a lot of that is evergreen. It's like it's good comedy structure where like there's a lot of setup and punchline, and the punchlines are not like of the time, they're just like, that's a funny non sequitur. So that's what I was gonna say, that's what works for me, at least, when you're like a lot of the jokes on the album were like that, where you're just like, oh, that still makes sense. I still know what an egg is to suck, or like stuff like that seems to work. So
and I find it what I like about it too is like he goes into like his jerk character, which I mean he basically transformed into a movie, and like these sort of catchphrases that he honestly, it's funny. There's like almost a symbiotic relationship between him and SNL because it heightened his career in so many ways in those first few years. But like the excuse me and all of that stuff, where it's like jerky, but it's not aggressive in a way. It's like it's all like I'm an asshole, like
Yeah.
but it's not like really aggressive with the audience.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting.
It's very much a character. It's not too much like you were referencing Kaufman before, who obviously like I love, but this character, I think also because we've all seen that comic, that's why it also doesn't feel aggressive. It's like, well, we know that guy. And the excuse me bit, because I was looking it up, I'm like, well, this must have been catchphrase before the album. Like, that's how good of a bit it was. This is that catchphrase of his caught on from this album. That was the first use of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's how well written it is and how well performed that bit was, that it already sounds like a catchphrase. But it's the first incarnation.
First
yeah.
instance,
Yeah.
Incarnation was the right word. You're right.
I got it.
Now, you mentioned the grandmother song. Both of you, what are your favorite? Like, do you have a favorite bit or a favorite joke on this album?
I'll go.
Oh, jeez. I had a couple. I really liked his started from the bottom bit, even though at first I was like, "Ooh, this is not going to age well." But then he punched up in a way that I was like, "Okay, you can get away with it for now." But it also made me think of the time. I started from the bottom. I started as a poor black kid, which at this time I feel like if it wasn't 2020, if it was 2019, you'd be like, "Yeah," but 2020 is making us really think about stuff like that. So at first, like not my first listen, the last time I listened before it, I took a step back for a second. And I was like, "Oh yeah, this bit," and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's how he ends it." And I became a weatherman. Stuff that makes me giggle, even though like I'm not thinking about Al Roker at the time. I'm thinking about both weathermen. It's shortened my penis, so stuff like that. So I really enjoyed that. There's another one that's like eluding me because that one's at the top of my head. Come back to me. Yeah. There's another non sequitur one where he was like, I do like the showbiz one and stuff, like the light and the gradual build to anger to the jerk character. I didn't know. I had to look that up too to be like, was the jerk out before this? Like, because they cheered. They were like, it was chomping at the bit, waiting for that like excuse me punchline. So double check. Like I thought the jerk came first when I first listened.
Yeah. And Luba, you have any other favorite bits?
Let's see. I mean, obviously the first one, the Ramblin' Guy, just because that's what throws you into it. I also like the one bit. I forget even the setup. Was it the one where he's mad at his mother, and then it ends with "So I shot her"? Like it's.
No, that's his. That's this is girlfriend.
That's right.
Girlfriend.
The girlfriend that he misses.
It's such a regular build and then such a pop where it's like, and it's also the kind of punchline where you're like, oh wait a minute, and then you're like, oh, that's just so dumb. You can't be mad at it.
That was it when I was looking for because the setup for that is like everyone I feel like is on edge about the whole drinking and driving thing, and so there's like with us like, oh, and I was drinking, I said no, and I was drinking, I said no, and so I feel like because that was one of the ones I was thinking, oh, that would play well today because we just have such a heightened awareness of it. I didn't know how well it played back then, and it does. Like you could feel the tension in there. And then when he says, "So I shot her," instead of like what everyone's holding their breath, and clutching their pearls for, thinking that he drove home drunk. They're just like it's both like a twist on it and a release all at the same time. That's what I really liked about that bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now there are some bits that would be problematic today, or are problematic. Like the starting from the bottom, or the Native American folk song.
Yep.
But I find, like, when and like I'd like to hear your feedback on this. I find when I listen to them, though, like the setup is problematic, but the punchline, he always seems to twist it around to make himself the target. So
Yeah.
it's not like, or the audience, like a lot of that stuff, like a lot of it feels like you guys are assholes and I'm making fun of you for laughing at this right now.
Yeah.
Because I'm making fun of me for making this joke, kind of thing. So it's like, it's a very deconstructionist kind of like self-reflective comedy, I find. Like that keeps it vibrant and keeps it like able to work.
Yeah. It's pretty much exactly what you said, where he's making fun of how bad it is. I still don't think, like, I'm sure someone would do it today, but I think it would. Yeah. So it literally has to take the consciousness of what was he trying to do in that time. Yeah. Like I don't think I'd enjoy anyone singing the Native American, like even in whatever context. I feel like if it's outside of that point of view, I don't think I'd like it today. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's an ongoing reflection of what was it at that time and what was he trying to say. But yeah. Does that make sense? Okay.
It makes sense to me. I think you're right. It's important that he doesn't, like, the punchline doesn't punch as down. I think that's why we can look at, like, there's a difference between like some old jokes where you like look at them and they punch down and then you feel bad about the whole thing, where here we're just like, ooh, that doesn't fly now, but I still laugh at, like, I still get where he's going. Like, that's the evergreenness of it, where like even back then he had the eyes of not punching down and not turning around and making himself the target is the same thing. And it seems like he's a little bit more worldly and more aware of it. There's the call out to his gay audience members that doesn't age well. But like that's another one of those jokes that I could still see being done today, just with the premise of like people are so sensitive, as opposed to like, are there anybody here? Like it's one of those like blue jokes that I feel like still would play well today.
Yeah, it really.
Yeah, like the thing I find in. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say it depends on who the comic is saying it, how they're saying it, who their audience is. Yeah, there's so many variables. Yeah.
And like for me with that joke, it scans very much as, oh, you're all actually hateful because you'll laugh at this when they're not in the room, kind of thing, which is like very much, again, it's like he's actually attacking that audience in a way that they don't necessarily see, or at least that's how it scans for me when listening to that material.
Yeah, because he's in that asshole character while he's doing it. So he's very much making fun of comics who would be seriously doing that. Yeah.
And I mean, I think it was an interesting time in comedy too, because it's sort of like the end of that like era of very like clean, straight-laced comedy. It was still coming to an end. Like Lenny Bruce was gone, and like so there's like this upheaval in comedy at that time. So you have these very firm structures of what is comedy, and then you have like this entire movement. And I don't like with him, like his material is so meticulously planned out. Like it seems very natural, but like he writes his jokes like he was planning a magic trick, where every movement, every vocalization is very deliberate. And I find that sort of like interesting to watch and listen to. Yeah, like I saw him perform with Martin Short the last time they came through Toronto. And I was so my wife got me the tickets. I'm like, oh, thank you so much. It's like so we watched, and it's just like watching him is like watching somebody like do a dance. It's just is brilliant because it's like everything is so natural, but you know he's got that planned out like all in his head, and he knows how to make it seem just effortless.
Yeah, especially when,
I just find that really interesting.
yeah, especially when his act has so much chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like one of the things I found interesting about this too is like it's an album, but there are so many act outs and physical bits in it. Do you feel that was like a deliberate choice on his part to sort of mess with the listener?
Yeah, and also to play with the audience, you know, if you're just one note the whole time throughout, yeah, I don't know, he keeps them on their toes for sure. Like it goes between banjos, act outs, everything. I'm like, that's only 2 things, but it's still a lot. And yeah, I guess as someone who tries their best to use different medias and different forms of their comedy, it's hard to keep everyone with you throughout all the ups and downs. So the way that he does it is, like you're saying, it's like a dance almost. It's seamless, but he puts it all together. Yeah.
I felt like and this comes up a lot between like some of the podcasts I listen to and people I talk to, that like the performance, who's the performance for? So like for a good example is Gerard Carmichael's 8, which I think is a phenomenal special, was for the special. Apparently the live audience did not enjoy it nearly as much as everybody else who watched it afterwards, where he only considered that. I think in this album, he remembered that he was recording, but he also remembered it was still a live show. And so his material's strong enough for a recording. But I feel like it's for the live audience, but he also wants the listener to know it's for the live audience. Like he wants the listener to know that like there's a bunch of things that are going on here that would have enhanced it, but it's still funny enough as an audio recording. And I think that's the difference, where a lot of people like do like act outs and stuff because like that's how they build their jokes. And it's like when you have a live audience, it's like easier to make those immediate laughs, and they don't really consider the audio like the listener afterwards or whoever they're recording the album for. And I think Steve Martin considered both, but he like made sure the live audience was enhanced first. So that's his first love, right? I guess as a magician, that's like you got to think about who's in front of you first, opposed to everyone else.
Yeah.
And this is also at a time where they don't have Spotify. They're not just going to fast forward to one bit. Like people are listening to this as a full album. So when you're at home, it feels like you're there because you're with it the whole way through. Yeah.
It was interesting too, because like there's a couple of albums where I've watched the specials and listened to the albums, like or in the movie in the case of like Sunset Strip, Pryor's Sunset Strip, and Seinfeld's, I can't remember the name of it, but it's his last stand-up special where he burnt all the material and he's like, I'll never do these jokes again, which wasn't really true. He turned around and did them like a decade later. But both of those, if you listen to the album, they are different performances from what's on the special. It's the same material, but they just will pitch the cadence so like there's slightly different variants on the bits. It's like different speed, and he's giving like the different pacing versus what's on screen. And I think to speak to what Martin was doing, where it's like no, this is my thing. Like if you really wanted to see it, you should have been here, kind of thing. So you're just gonna get this and deal with it. But it's still good. It's still magic.
Yeah, and he still references that it's an album. Like I think at the end of the Grandmother song, he's like, "You guys are gonna be on a record."
Yeah, not mine, but one someday maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, like something I found really cool. Like the plumber joke is one of those ones that stands out for me because it
Oh yeah.
so it's a long joke, and it's essentially like a minute and a half, 2 minutes of nonsense, with the tag being the killer punchline, and it's so funny to me because it's like it's just is this the rapid fire technical terms on something. He's like, oh, are they supposed to be here tomorrow at the end kind of thing? And it's like, and it had everybody in just laughing. And how much, and I think that comes from his delivery, like how much power does selling the bit have, do you think, when you get like that kind of nonsense or silliness, and just how do you get the audience to buy in when you're doing something like that?
I think it's he fully committed to it, and two, I do love that bit actually, because I can feel like everyone is into what he's saying. Like there's got to be some facial expressions that are involved, like the sprocket, like there's like winks and nods where you're like, you're following what the structure of a joke is, which is how it works up to that point because he's such a great joke writer. And I feel like people understand what he is doing, and they don't need, like, he could have said anything at that point. He could have said, like, we have a bunch of babies in the audience, so I wrote this show for a bunch of babies. And then he went goo goo gaga, goo goo gaga, goo goo, and people would just be with him because he's still structuring the joke in a way that people understand. The tag is killer to me, but I thoroughly enjoyed that. That joke to me, I liked, but it felt like such a live experience show. Again, that's like one of those jokes that I don't feel like I can ever do in my sets. I could see Luba doing a joke like that and be like, oh, this is for you. This is just something I'm thinking about right now. But it's something a lot, like I could just imagine seeing that live and just enjoying and watching like some people looking around for the plumbers and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
Now he really does straddle that, like there's like the two sides of his energy where there's this very calm and like almost embracing energy, especially when he's doing like the musical bits. Like it's it's just there's the kindness in it, and then but then on the counterpoint to that is that manic jerk energy, like the spotlight or all of those bits where he's sort of like just the hostility that's there. Like, do you feel it's hard? Like, how hard is, like, in your experiences with like crowd work and managing a set, and like how hard is it to maintain that tension? Like to know, okay, I'm not pulling too far in one way or too far in the other, just to like walk that tightrope and keep it just perfectly balanced.
That's such a big question. Practice. I guess that kind of leads into what we were talking before. You don't want to be the same tone throughout, and you also want to read the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're at a super high energy, and sorry, you'll see this with like I'm trying to think of local comics, someone like Marito, who's like high energy, strong energy, but then he'll take it down. You have to take it down, even if it starts with just, taking a sip of water. You let them laugh it out and you kind of start over, you hear Steve Martin kind of do that throughout the album. He'll get these big pops, audience applauds, and it also helps that it's music. So you get that end of the song, like, yay, you breathe for a second. You do a 1.5 minute bit and then you build it back up. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. It's a lot of balancing. Yeah.
I would say if I master that, then it'd be on a different level. It's the waves, the nights that I feel like I've got that are, first of all, they're always hosting nights when I'm hosting my show at Comedy Bar. Double down in case I can bring it back anytime soon. But it's an energy that you have, like you feel like it's like when you're playing sports and you're hit. I played a lot of basketball and I start hitting every shot. You just feel it. You like feel that energy, and you just have a swagger and a confidence. You like run down the court differently. I feel like that's the same thing. I also feel like he backs it up, right? He starts by playing the banjo, which is a difficult instrument to play, and then he plays it well, and then quietly but loud enough so everyone can hear, he goes, oh, he's really good. And you can't deny it, but it's also like not in a tone, like it's not in like an arrogant tone that makes you hate him. It's like it's funny, but it's true. But it's
almost like Jim Gaffigan's inner voice, where it's like he has the two voices. That Steve Martin's like, oh, this guy is good. Yeah. That's Jim Gaffigan. Yeah, you know.
Yes.
Really, yeah.
That's a certain personality, but it's also a certain confidence and a practice that like you get throughout the years. So like there are some comics that can never tell you they're good, even though they are great. And then after a while they can tell you they're great, but it took a long time to get to that point to tell you they're great. And Steve Martin's at that point where he's like, oh, you're gonna laugh at this, and you laugh at that setup. So
yeah,
I really wish.
And I mean, the thing I love about how he incorporates the banjo in this album too is it's constantly there. It doesn't feel gimmicky at all. It just feels like an extension of what he's trying to do. Like there's some people like, oh, now I'm gonna play you a song, and pulls out, but it's just like he's there, he's got it, and it's just part of the set. Whereas like I just find, you know, quite often, unless it's like musical comedy, like there's some people who like Flo and Joan, for example, who I love, who do musical comedy, where it's just like it's straight musical comedy and they have their banter, but you're there for the songs. Or it's like he just weaves it in and out so organically, like I've not seen that very often in performances.
Mm-hmm. I haven't thought to think of a local example, but outside of present company, who does it well? What's his name? Dimitri
Martin?
Dimitri Martin does that really well too.
Mm-hmm.
Where he can go through bits and play songs, and it doesn't feel like he's a music comic, or he kind of straddles both.
Yeah. It's more just a method to heighten.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, have either of you found Steve Martin's work informing your own, not necessarily performance technique, but how you approach comedy in any way?
Yes.
So, what have you been able to draw from him?
I think in my method to writing, usually if I'm looking for a spark, is I'll just listen to my favorite albums or my favorite bits. So when I listen, even if it's a bit that I've heard 100 times from this album, it's just a good reminder of what I'm doing it for, you know? Like I can write a bit about whatever, and then I'll listen to, again, like the Grandmother Song. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to be silly, you know, like just, you know, it's not just about being funny. I need to amp this up a little bit or whatever. It reminds me of where I need to tweak my own stuff to get to the goal that I want to be at. Yeah. So yeah. And not just with Steve Martin, you know, sometimes I'll listen to Dimitri Martin and stuff like that. I'm like, oh yeah, so this is why this is funny. It's not just a hack one line, it's better, or Mitch Hedberg or something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's fun that you have two different comics on here talking about it. I wouldn't say he was my initial inspiration. Like my initial inspirations are Eddie Murphy and Chris Rock. More Chris Rock than Eddie Murphy. I just don't do voices. But since I was recommended when I started comedy to read Born Standing Up,
Mm-hmm.
and talk about his meticulous approach to everything. It's not just comedy. It's the writing. It's his magic. It's music, and I think that is what I'm starting to take from it. It's just kind of how different approaches I have within my skill set. There are some things I can do. Can I use all the tools in my skill set to fully form a whole routine, not just one of these bits.
Yeah.
And I was kind of reminded about it because as I said, this is like, I think this is the third time I've listened to it. Today was the third time I listened to it, but I listened to this like a couple days ago. And then from that, wrote a new bit that I'm very happy with. And it just kind of like made me think, because I had the premise for a while. And then I just thought about different ways of approaching this premise and where I like prop something up, where I put myself down, and then I bring myself kind of up to that level, but in a like authentic way. And so from that, I'm a little bit more inspired, like that, like studying that approach and applying it to my craft is a little bit more, is a little different, as opposed to like applying music. Like I'm not at that level.
Yeah.
Well, I've done it before, but that's a whole other story.
From I'm still a comedy baby kind of thing. I mean, I'm doing the improv for a while, and I mean, only been doing like open mics probably for about like a little less than a year. And for me, it's like when I listen to him, I hear like it's the new, like the little garnishes that he puts on things that can actually make so much of a difference. Like when he's talking about, he does that pop star bit in Vegas, and it's like, oh, there's 57 breasts up on stage, and they're, wait a second, that's not an even number. There's 50. That doesn't make sense. And so it's like this. It's like that little, the little things can make some. It's that, and it's an eye to detail. Like you got to think about everything, and not necessarily sweat it, but just find the funny in the little parts. The little things can actually sometimes make a big difference, kind of thing. Do you either of you think there are any people now who are sort of carrying on his tradition of comedy, if you will?
Bo Burnham probably would be the closest.
Bo Burnham, yeah, for sure, Bo Burnham.
Yeah.
I saw elements. Have you seen Miami Nights by Hannibal Buress? His newest one. He just released it on YouTube.
No.
There's an element in there where he kind of plays with like different mediums and effects and stuff. Like it's made to be watched. Like it's not a listenable album. There's some punchlines that are like visual.
Okay.
Bo Burnham is like by far the easy example. Kristen Shaw is like taking some examples. Dimitri Martinez we've mentioned. Yeah. But like the most off-brand movie, Hannibal vs. Miami Nights. Like I highly recommend it. But there was a bit in there which he did, and I was like, oh, that's something I could do. It's based off a rapper, and so it's great.
Nice.
Now, if somebody came to you and said, what comedy albums should I listen to? Would you include this on that list? Do you think it's an album that people should listen to?
Yes, I would say that it's a, and even if they don't enjoy it, I think it's an important learning album. Like if I were to teach a class, it would be in the top 10. Yeah.
I would fully agree.
Cool.
As someone who doesn't, as I said, not this vein of comedy, if you've ever watched me. But I got something from it, and Steve Martin is a master. In fact, he teaches a master class. Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend who took that, and I'm like so jealous. I want that like pretend 5 minutes with Steve Martin. That they kind of like, oh, I'll read your work and I'll get back to you. I'm like, no, you're not reading it. But yeah, awesome. Okay, so before like any last thoughts, let's start with you, Luba. Any last thoughts on the album? Anything like you'd like to say or highlight about it before we wrap up?
No, I like it. I still have the record, and I when I throw it on the turntable, it's a good feeling. Yeah.
And yeah?
I think everyone should listen to it, even if you're a super edgy, real comic. If you're a comedian, listen to it. If you like comedy, listen to it. You'll enjoy it. It may not end up being your cup of tea, but you'll still enjoy it. And I think that's an important thing.
Cool. All right. So if people wanted to see you perform or see your work, where can they find you both online?
So I have my YouTube channel where I have some stand-up and also a lot of cartoons and some other videos that I make. So youtube.com/LubaMagnus for everything. Also in that, the animation subsect is called Drawn Up, which is also a live show that I run. So you can follow me on Instagram at Drawn Up Comedy. And then at Luba Magnus on Twitter and Instagram. Yeah.
So you could find me on all the social medias. So your Twitter, your Instagram, your Facebook at Yow Experience. That's YAW Experience. So your favorite website, /Yow Experience. And then go to yowexperience.com where you can see whenever I'm doing shows. I usually post them up there. Hopefully I can fill that out soon. But I also have some fun writings that I put up there and stuff like that. So yeah, find me there.
All right. Terrific. Well, I want to thank you both for being on the show and talking about Steve Martin's Let's Get Small.
Hey y'all, Darius Rucker here. You know, a lot of people ask me, what inspires your music? And one of the big things is a strong sense of place. That's why I love my home state of South Carolina and want to share the awesome things it has to offer. From the beautiful mountains down to the sunny coast, it's got it all. Not to mention two of my personal favorites, great golf and amazing food. Come see why I love this place. Visit discoversouthcarolina.com.
Swimsuit? Check. Sunscreen? Check. Phone charger? Check. Don't forget to pack the 5-Hour Energy. It fits great in a pocket or carry-on, and the alert feeling will help you arrive ready for anything. Now get 20% off when you use code 5HETRAVEL at 5hourenergy.com. Expires April 30th. One-time use only. Not valid with other discounts. Remember, visit 5hourenergy.com and use code 5HETRAVEL to save 20%.